Terms for external borrowing have been set at 50% of the country's gross domestic product. For Uganda, the gross domestic product was worth $25.53 billion as of the year 2016. In the face of a slowing economy and reduced public sector activity, the government has continued to increase expenditure. However, with a growing demand to fund major projects and limited resources, government is in a tight spot, forcing them to borrow domestically. As the mathematics of borrowing paint a gloomy picture on Uganda's economy, the Permanent Secretary and Secretary to the Treasury, Mr. Keith Muhakanizi, say the story is not as bad as it is portrayed. To Muhakanizi, Uganda is still well within its limits and hasn't hit the ceiling when it comes to borrowing, but the need to expand works is what pushes the country to borrow.
And I can confirm that we have not yet reached there. Although I think what is making people concerned is the speed at which debt is growing, and I think that's what's making people concerned. But I have to say that at this stage, Uganda's debt is still a sustainable debt. It's still termed as low risk debt.
The total amount of money as per Bank of Uganda report that we have borrowed, our total debt stock, is at $11.7 billion. And that's around like 33% of our GDP.
The main message people keep saying is we are still below the 50. But it's never a clear, precise thing on when your debt stresses you. It can even be at 10 because we know countries are at 250% and they are managing. So a question of whether the economy is able to sustain and generate enough revenues. If you have a lot of non-functioning, low productive areas in the economy, then even a debt of 50% can wear you off.
The country's continued appetite for borrowing is slowly but steadily getting out of control, with seasoned debt analysts warning of dire consequences.
There is the dynamics of the infrastructure, multi-year infrastructure, will have an impact on debt. The dynamics of those over the period of like 5 years may force you to borrow more than you had anticipated at the beginning. So the dynamics of the infrastructure, because we are borrowing much of this money, even when we are borrowing domestically, we are borrowing to put money into counterpart funding for infrastructure.
The total is about 12 trillion of that, or even slightly more. So we have been borrowing, or at least government has been taking money domestically. The implication of that is, one, you have moved that money from the private sector, which people will call crowding out. But secondly, it costs you money, depending on what you use that money for. You have got to pay interest rates on that money that you have borrowed. So if you have not used it wisely, then you are going to be costing yourself other areas, maybe like drugs, school fees, salaries for civil servants, because debt takes the first call on resources.
So the best way to do as a government, a quickest way to do, which is very damaging, is to go to the domestic market. Because domestic markets, money is there, available all the time. And even actually, we have just read a report from the Minister of Finances that the demand is very high for our treasury bills and bonds. But that's a shortcut that is damaging to the economy.
When asked whether Uganda will be able to pay back its debt, Mr. Muhakanizi had this to say.
Uganda government is paying its debt due on a timely basis, no problem. But we must also watch at which debt is growing, so to ensure that it remains sustainable.
Economists pointed out the wastage in government resources that is affecting their outcome and have called upon government to scale down on expenditure. In the year 2017, Bank of Uganda released a State of Economy report that indicated that Uganda's debt burden was standing at $11.2 billion. And this was not about to stop. Most of the monies that are collected will be used to fund major projects such as infrastructure. However, you will ask any economist and they will tell you that for a country to be able to repay back its debt, the economy needs to grow. Isabella Tugume, NBS, live at 9.